Of course, Venus doesn't actually draw a pentagram, but the points of her alignment between us and the Sun form a precise pattern. It happens like this. Most other planets orbit the Sun in an ellipse, but Venus's orbit is a nearly perfect circle. Its perihelion and aphelion aren't all that divergent from each other. That's part of what makes the pentagram possible. It happens over an 8-year cycle, during which the Earth, Venus, and the Sun all line up, with Venus in between the Earth and the Sun. In 8 years, Venus forms a conjunction with the Sun from our perspective 10 times. 5 of those times, she is on the far side of the Sun from us. The other 5, she's on the near side, and always in apparent retrograde motion when that happens. Of course, planets never really travel backward. It is an optical illusion caused by 2 planets getting far away from each other relative to the Sun, and then appearing to catch up with each other. When Venus is on the far side of the Sun, she forms a superior conjunction. When she's on the near side, it's an inferior conjunction, and it's from this that the synodic cycle is calculated. Synod means place of meeting. Venus orbits the Sun in 224.7 days, so she goes around the Sun 2.6 times, and we go around the Sun 1.6 times, before we come to another alignment in the inferior conjunction. That's just shy of 584 days. Each inferior conjunction is 215.6 degrees further ahead than the previous one, and the result looks like this. Starting from the last transit of Venus in 2004, 584 days pass before they align again, at which points they are 215 degrees around the ecliptic. Then another 584 days go by, and they meet again 215 degrees later, and so on, until the inferior conjunction happens again at nearly the original starting point 8 years previously, a couple of degrees further west, and the cycle begins again. Now, if you join these 5 points in the order of their contact, what do you get? Not just any pentagram. Which direction are you going? You've just made an invoking pentagram, the kind that draws spirit to you. You start at the top, draw down to the right, and follow on. If it were a banishing pentagram, you would be drawing down to the left. That's the one I use to pacify and bless the soul of a roadkill. And there's more. Venus rotates in the opposite direction from all the other planets, including Earth. From the perspective of looking at the North Pole, we rotate clockwise, while Venus rotates counterclockwise. The Venus year is 224.7 days, but its day is longer than its year. Its rotation is very slow, 243 days, exactly 2/3 of an Earth year. This means that it has exactly 12 days in the 8-year synodic cycle, and every time she is closest to us at the inferior conjunction, she is showing the same side of her face to us. The synergy between us and her is nearly perfect, hence her reputation for conjugal harmony. And speaking of harmony, the Venus day is 2/3 of an Earth year. What do you get when you play a 2/3 interval in music? The perfect fifth, considered the most pleasing harmonic and the one that vibrates the longest. So you've got a fifth in music and 5 inferior conjunctions that form a near-perfect five-pointed star, an emblem which figured prominently in the medieval courtly love romances like Sir Gawain and the Green Knight, who had one emblazoned on his shield. So now the question becomes, if we get inferior conjunctions with Venus every 1.6 years, why don't we see transits of Venus every time? Why do they only come along every 105 or 121 years? Venus's orbit is tilted about 3.394 degrees. Where that orbit crosses the ecliptic, Venus has north and south nodes, just like the Moon does. Most of the time, when Venus is forming the inferior conjunction with us and the Sun, she is too far above or below the ecliptic for us to see her. She disappears into the rays of the Sun, which, according to Vedic astrology, makes a planet combust. Venus has to be very near one of her nodes on the ecliptic and in alignment with us at inferior conjunction at the same time, in order for the line of sight to make her visible to us across the face of the Sun. That's when we get a Venus transit. We get them in 8-year pairs because they happen at the start and end of the synodic cycle. Then 121.5 years go by before the next pair, then there's a gap of 105.5 years, then another pair, then another 121.5 years of dry spell, another pair, then another 105.5 years, and so on, alternating between 121.5 and 105.5 years before the next pair shows up. And they always occur in June and December, alternating. 2 in December, 2 in June, 2 in December, 2 in June. They are the rarest of all astronomical phenomena. Mercury transits are rare too, but we get about 14 of them per century. We are extraordinarily privileged that we'll get to see a Venus transit. Throughout recorded history, the transit of Venus has only been observed 6 times. It was never mentioned prior to the 17th century because spotting one is very tricky. You would only be able to see it with the naked eye if you were looking at the Sun near the horizon at exactly the right time. During the Renaissance, Johannes Kepler correctly predicted that Venus would pass in front of the Sun in December 1631. But that transit was not visible from Europe, so most people weren't aware of it. The second transit in that pair, December 7, 1639, was observed by Horrocks and Crabtree. By the time the next pair came along in 1761 and 1769, scientists were ready with telescopes at more than 100 observation points around the world. By assembling the data from all of these stations, they would be able to calculate the size of the solar system as well as the distance from the Earth to the Sun. One scientist even figured out that Venus has an atmosphere because a glow was visible around the planet. For the Victorian era pair in 1874 and 1882, it was no longer a scientific curiosity. It was headline news all over the world. Everybody wanted to see it. Coming up, why was sex in the very air during the 2004 transit of Venus? Could it happen again?